Today I'm sharing how to elevate your furniture by adding wood trim. I'm Denise from Salvaged Inspirations and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm sharing how to add furniture trim to a plain piece of furniture, a simple formula to space your trim perfectly, how to easily mix a custom paint color, and more. I hope this salvage chest makeover inspires you to give it a try. So here's what I started with. And this cedar chest had really great bones. The outside was a bit banged up. You can see that some of the veneer was missing. There were some scratches. There was a huge ink stain or some sort of stain smack dab on the top lid. But the inside, it was meticulous. So that was a big bonus. And this cedar chest makeover is a perfect example of how a little wood trim can totally change the look of a plain piece of furniture. There was an existing trim on this cedar chest on the very top and bottom. So I took a trip to Home Depot trying to find an exact match. I didn't find a 3/4 trim with the 4 scallops, but I did find a 3/4 with 3 scallops, which would be a super duper match for this. I picked up 3, which was around a $45 cost. Cedar chest was $30, so I was already $75 in. Kind of funny how the trim costs more than the actual piece of furniture, but just wait and see what a difference it makes. So once I got back home, I removed all the stickers and I started giving this chest a really good cleaning with white lightning and a sponge, a large sponge. And I like doing it in a spray bottle. I just spray it on and give it a really good wipe down. And I did the inside, the out, also the bottom. And then what I do is I rinse my sponge with clean water and I go over it a few times just to get rid of any of the residue. While I was cleaning the bottom of this piece, I noticed that the brackets that held these little legs on had 2 separate screw holes. And I love my readers on the SI blog. You guys are so observant because when I purchased it, these little legs were on the inside of the bracket. When I do the whole makeover, I actually swapped it over to the more outside bracket, and you guys picked up on that right away. So you know what? You guys are amazing. I think it's fabulous that this little piece has the choice to change the little legs around. Once the furniture was clean and dry, I took the trim and I started playing around with the configuration of how I was going to apply it. And I started by thinking, well, maybe horizontal lines on the piece would look great. I also tried doing some abstract trim design on the front. Then I decided laying them vertically with maybe a couple of inches in between was what I liked the best. This option was a little more work, but I think well worth it. I went ahead and measured what length I needed to cut my trim. I believe it was 13 1/4 or 13 3/4. I'm not remembering now that I'm doing the voiceover. Whatever the number was, I went ahead and I marked it down on the trim. And remember, measure twice, cut once. That's a great rule I remind myself of all the time. So before I cut all the length to that size, I went and did a test piece. Then I brought it back into my paint room and made sure that it fit really snug between the 2 existing trim pieces on this trunk. And it did. It was perfect. Now that I knew that the trim pieces were perfect, I went back into my sanding room and I started using my saw to cut down all the trim pieces. So I measured against the first piece. I would mark it off with a pencil. Then using my measuring tape, I would double check that I was sitting perfectly at 13 and I think it was 13 1/4 if I'm not mistaken. So that was my double check that it was the exact length I needed it. And then I would go ahead and cut it. Now for trim this small, you certainly do not need a miter saw or chop saw or anything to do this. A hand saw would work just as well. I just figured since I had it handy, it might make things a little quicker. And I just went ahead and kept repeating the same process. I would use my the model trim that I originally cut to mark off the 13 1/4. I would double check with my measuring tape, and then I would cut. And I rinsed and repeat, rinsed and repeat, rinsed and repeat. I think it was like 18 times until I had all my trim cut down. Now that I had them all cut to size, it was time to figure out the spacing I wanted and needed, what I thought would look good. Now, I'm the first to admit my math skills aren't the best, so I am a little embarrassed to admit this. I spent over an hour trying to figure out how to space all the trim evenly. And here, I thought I had it all figured out. I was marking it off with a pencil. I was adding, I think it was 2 inches in between each one. And then when I got to the end, I realized this is wrong. Thank goodness for YouTube. I found this awesome video explaining how to get equal spacing between trim from Tyler at Wood Nerds. And what I'll do is I'll make sure I include a link to his YouTube channel down below so you can go check it out as well. So here's the math in a nutshell, which makes it so easy. I measured the front of the chest where the trim would be. This was 36.25 inches. I put together all the trim and measured that up, which was 11.75 inches. So 36.25 inches minus the trim, 11.75 inches equals 24.5. I divide it by the number of spaces in between each trim piece, which was 14. That gives me 1.75 inches between each slat. Now I measured it all out. I put all the slats on and it looked perfect. Now for the more fun and easy part, I went ahead and used some wood glue to apply each piece of trim onto the wood chest. When I had it perfectly in place, I used my pneumatic brad nailer to nail it in place as well. I removed the excess glue with a shop towel and then would move on to my next piece of trim. Once all the trim was adhered, to give it a professional finish, the last step was to give the nails that some were a little protruding out, use this nail punch to set and inset all the nail heads that were sticking out slightly from the trim. So using the nail punch and a hammer, I just sink them below the trim line and then use some wood filler to fill in all the details for a smooth finish. However, before I did any sort of wood filling for the veneer scratches, the hole punches, etc., I used a coat of bonding Bosch, which is a bonding primer and stain killer. Now, I knew I needed a stain blocker because of that big stain that was sitting smack dab on the top lid. Plus, this veneer was so red. I knew there was going to be a lot of bleed through. So I just wanted to get a coat of bonding Bosch on this piece, and then I could go back in and fill in any of the tiny little holes, scratches, places where the veneer was missing, etc. Because this makes it so easy to see what needs to be filled once you have a coat of primer on it. I love using a foam roller to apply my primer. I find it very easy to do this way. And I also found a new, I got a new chip brush. It's a synthetic a plastic chip brush, which is super inexpensive. I think it's all of $1.25 or $1.50, and it's awesome for applying this primer. And it's throwaway. I mean, if you don't want to keep it, I like wrapping it up and reusing it when I'm putting on 2 or 3 coats of primer. However, you don't have to keep it. It's inexpensive enough that you can throw it away for one use, and it applies the primer really nicely. It worked really well on the trim and getting in between all the slats. Here's what this cedar chest looked like after the first coat of primer. And you can see the bleed through is already coming through. You can also see everywhere where it needs a little wood fill. The next day I came down and I applied Dixie Belle Mud, which is a wood filler, and I used white, but you could use any color. It comes in brown, black, and white. Color really doesn't matter. And I filled in all the little nooks and crannies that needed some attention. And this included all the little holes that were made by the trim gun and the nail punch. Once the wood fill was all dry, I brought it into my sanding room, and using my Bosch orbital sander on the large surfaces, I started sanding all that wood filler perfectly smooth. For the edges, I took a little square piece of wood, wrapped some sandpaper around it, and hand sanded for nice, crisp, clean edges. And this wood fill is so easy to hand sand. That's why I chose it. It just like powders off so easily and gives a really nice, smooth finish. So everything was sanded perfectly smooth. I removed all the sanding dust and brought it back into my paint room. And here's where a custom paint color comes into play. With fall just around the corner, I see that the leaves are starting to change colors. We have cooler temps here in the Toronto area. I was thinking of pumpkin lattes, which have now come out at all the coffee shops. And I don't know, just a few of my favorite things because I do love the fall season. So I created a custom fall paint color using the Dixie Belle Color Lab. And I wanted to create like a caramel, pumpkin, spicy, yummy color for the upcoming season. So I used the formula and I added approximately 80% Yellowstone, which is a silk all-in-one mineral paint, to 20% prickly pear, which is also in the silk line. I mixed them all together and I started painting. Now, when I started painting on my first coat, it kind of looked nothing like the screenshot on the Dixie Belle Color Lab. And then I figured out, I always have to keep this in mind, my paint studio is filled with heavy duty lighting so I can see everything that I'm spraying and painting. Plus, the lighting was put in because taking video and images, I want you to see exactly what's going on. So the lighting is heavy duty in my studio. So I often have to remember when I'm using new to me colors, they often don't look anything like what they will look like when I bring it upstairs into natural lighting. So as I was painting on the first coat, I was thinking, this really looks like an orange pumpkin, which is not what I originally had in mind. Not that I have anything against orange, but like I said, it wasn't looking like the Color Lab custom color that I created. But you know what? I just have to trust the process. I always have to tell myself that because often when you first start painting a piece, it does not look like you imagined it would. It goes through an ugly phase. It really does. That first coat of paint is not attractive at all. So I just trusted the process. I let the first coat of paint dry. I added the second coat of paint, which started looking better because, the white primer wasn't beating through. I have a better look at what this custom color looked like. And by the third coat was a charm. It was looking really beautiful. And you'll see what a difference lighting makes when I bring it upstairs to my staging room, and then I show you the after pics because it looks very different than down in my paint studio. For the finishing details, after my third coat was perfectly dry, I opened the cedar chest up and I painted the inner lips of the cedar chest just to finish everything off beautifully. While that was drying, I removed the painter's tape from the brass part of the bottom of the little legs, which took some finagling because that paint really had it stuck on there. Then using an artist brush and some gilding wax in gold, I freshened up the bottom part of these legs just to make them look new again. And I was all finished. I brought it upstairs, I stage styled, and just as a reminder, here's the before. And here's the after. And I think this trim looks awesome on this little cedar chest. It just looks amazing. I think it updates the piece so nicely. I love the custom color. In natural lighting, this is the true color that I had originally thought it was going to be when I made up that recipe. So Again, I'm so happy I trusted the process and continued painting with it down in my studio because I think this color is perfect for this little chest. I cannot wait to hear what you think. I hope this has encouraged you to give some wood trim a try on your pieces. And as always, you can like and subscribe here on YouTube. Feel free to leave me a comment because I love hearing from you. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. You can also find me over at salvagedinspirations.com, where I have over 500 furniture painting tutorials teaching you how to make your furniture beautiful. And until next time, have a fabulous week. Bye, guys.